Some buildings have rooms that shouldn't be there, rooms that weren't built on any blueprint, rooms that show up when no one is looking. And if you find one, never go inside, because sometimes, once you enter, you can't come back out. Daniel Rhodes didn't believe in ghost stories. He was a 32-year-old real estate agent, logical, grounded in reality. When he found a spacious, low-rent apartment in Edgewood Towers, he didn't hesitate. The place was perfect. Modern kitchen, great location, quiet neighbors. Except for one thing. There was an extra door. One that wasn't in the floor plan. The rest of the apartment had sleek white doors. But this one was old. The wood was dark and cracked. The handle rusted, covered in deep scratches, as if something had clawed at it from the inside. It had no keyhole, no way to lock it, and no one talked about it. The landlord handed him the keys and hesitated. "There are some old parts of this building," he muttered. "Rooms that aren't used anymore." Daniel frowned. "So what's inside?" The landlord didn't answer. Instead, he said something strange. "If you ever hear something from behind that door, don't open it." Daniel laughed. "Why?" The landlord met his eyes. His face was pale. "Because there is no extra room in your apartment." Daniel moved in without much trouble. He set up his furniture, unpacked his boxes, ignored the scratches on the extra door. That night, he fell asleep easily. Until the knocking woke him up. Tap, 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 soft, slow. Daniel sat up in bed, heart pounding. The sound was coming from inside the extra room. At first, he tried to rationalize it. Old pipes, a neighbor. Then he saw the doorknob move, slowly, twisting left, then right, like someone was trying to get out. The air turned cold. Then, a whisper, low, breathless. "Let me out." Daniel's blood ran cold. He grabbed his phone. No signal. His hands were shaking. Then suddenly, silence. The doorknob stopped moving. The tapping ceased. But the air in his room felt wrong, as if something was still there, watching him, waiting. Daniel didn't move until sunrise. The next day, Daniel forced himself to forget. Maybe he had dreamed it. Maybe the old landlord had just freaked him out. But as he walked past the extra door, he noticed something new. The door was open. Just an inch. Just enough for something to look out. A chill ran down his spine. He knew he had shut it. Daniel exhaled slowly, grabbed the handle, and pushed the door closed. The second the latch clicked, a whisper right behind him. "You shouldn't have done that." Daniel spun. The hallway was empty. That night, he locked his bedroom door, left the TV on, told himself everything was fine. At 3:12 a.m., the power went out. Everything plunged into darkness. The room was silent. Then, a creak, software slow, coming from the hallway. Daniel held his breath. Something was moving. Then, the scratching began. Long, slow scrapes against the extra door. Daniel's body went rigid. Then, a whisper right at his bedroom door. "I'm coming out now." Daniel called maintenance the next morning. "There's something wrong with my apartment," he told them. The man on the phone hesitated. "Which unit?" 42B. A long silence. "Sir," the man said slowly, "that unit should be empty." Daniel felt his stomach twist. "I live here." Another long pause. Then, the line went dead. That night, Daniel did something he shouldn't have. He opened the extra door. The door creaked open slowly. Inside, the room was wrong. It wasn't a closet. It wasn't storage. It was a hallway. A long, dark hallway that stretched into the impossible distance, far beyond the walls of his apartment. The air was thick, damp, Wrong. The wallpaper peeled like old flesh. The floor was covered in deep scratch marks, and at the far end of the hallway, a door, identical to the one he had just opened. Something stood beside it. A shape. Tall, thin, wrong. Watching him, smiling, Daniel's breath hitched. The whisper came from the darkness. "Why did you open the door?" Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. The impossible hallway stretched before him, too long, too deep, too wrong. The air felt alive. It pulsed thick and damp, pressing against his skin. The figure at the end didn't move. It just watched. Smiling, Daniel took a step back. The floor creaked beneath him. And the thing at the end of the hallway? It took a step forward. Daniel slammed the door shut. His breath came in shallow, panicked gasps. His hands were shaking. Then, a sound. Knock, 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 from the inside. Then a whisper. "Let me out." Daniel backed away. He grabbed his car keys, his jacket. He was leaving. But when he reached the front door, it wouldn't open. The locks were undone. The handle turned, but the door wouldn't budge. It was like the air itself was holding it shut. Daniel's stomach twisted. Then, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. His hands trembled as he answered. Static. Then a voice. His own voice. "You shouldn't have opened the door." Click. Daniel sat in his living room, gripping a kitchen knife. The lights flickered. The apartment felt smaller, suffocating. At 3:12 a.m., the power went out. Then, the breathing began, software slow, right behind him. Daniel's body went stiff. He didn't turn, didn't breathe. Then, a hand touched his shoulder. Cold. Too long. Daniel spun around. Nothing was there. But the door to the impossible hallway was wide open again. A voice whispered from inside. "Come see?" Daniel should have run, should have fought harder to escape, but something pulled him forward. His body moved against his will. Step by step by step, into the hallway. His breath came in shallow gasps. The walls shifted as he moved. The air was damp, thick with a rotting scent. And at the end of the hallway, the second door. Just like the first. Except this one had a lock. Daniel hesitated. Then from behind him, a whisper, closer. "You're almost there." Daniel's shaking hand reached for the doorknob. His skin crawled. Something behind him moved too fast. He could feel it watching. His fingers brushed the handle. Then he heard it. A low, ragged breathing, right behind him. Daniel turned, and he saw it. A shape, tall, thin, bone-white skin. It had no eyes, no mouth, just a smiling slit where its lips should be. Daniel couldn't move. The whisper slid into his ear. "Go inside." Daniel's fingers twisted the knob. The second door swung open, and inside was his own apartment. Daniel stepped inside the second door. His apartment was identical, except for one thing. The extra door was gone. He swallowed hard, turning in a slow circle. Everything was exactly the same. His furniture, his shoes by the door, his reflection in the mirror. No, his reflection wasn't right. It wasn't moving. Daniel blinked. It didn't. Then it smiled, a wide, unnatural grin. Daniel took a step back. His reflection took a step forward. The voice whispered behind him, "You should have stayed out." The reflection moved on its own now. It cocked its head, grinning, watching. Then it stepped out of the mirror. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The thing that looked like him took another step. The air crackled around it. "You don't belong here." Daniel turned to run, but the front door was gone. There was no way out. Then, the other. Daniel lunged. Daniel fought. He grabbed a lamp, smashed it over its head. It didn't stop. The thing grinned wider. It grabbed Daniel's wrist, cold, bone-thin fingers digging into his skin. He kicked, struggled, gasped for air. Then he remembered the second door, the way he got here. He turned, sprinting. The other Daniel screamed, a high, unnatural, inhuman sound. Daniel reached the second door, yanked it open. Behind it, the dark hallway, but the first door was still there, the way back home. Daniel ran. The hallway shook. The walls screamed. The air closed in. Something grabbed at his ankles. Something whispered, begging him to stay. He reached the first door and slammed it shut behind him. Daniel collapsed on the floor of his apartment. His real apartment. The extra door was gone. No hallway, no whispers, just silence. He had made it back, or so he thought. That night he looked in the mirror, and his reflection, it wasn't smiling anymore. It was watching, waiting for the right moment to switch places again. Daniel moved out the next morning. He left everything behind, but the next tenant of apartment 42B. They found something strange, a mirror with deep scratches along the glass. And sometimes, when they weren't looking, their reflection would move on its own, smiling, waiting for the next one, for someone like you. If you enjoy the story, subscribe to the channel and like the video and comment your thoughts about this video.